Imagine a conflict that has lasted over 7 decades. A set of islands lost in the misty North Pacific, holding the fate of two powerful nations hostage. Welcome to the Kuril Islands dispute, where history, war, and politics collide, and where the wounds of World War II still refuse to heal. This is the story of the Kuril Islands, or as Japan calls them, the Northern Territories. The chain of islands stretches like a string of volcanic pearls between the northeastern tip of Japan's Hokkaido and Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. There are about 56 islands in the entire Kuril chain. But at the heart of this decades-long standoff lie 4 specific islands: Iturup, Kunashir, Shikotan, and the Habomai Islets. Small in size but enormous in geopolitical importance, these islands have kept Russia and Japan from signing a formal peace treaty since World War II ended in 1945. But to truly understand why these islands remain such a painful flashpoint, we need to journey back in time. Long before Soviet tanks rolled into Berlin, the earliest records of the Kuril Islands go back centuries. The indigenous Ainu people once fished, hunted, and traded across these islands. For generations, they lived between what we know today as Japan and Russia. In the 17th century, both Japanese and Russian explorers started pushing into the region. Japan officially claimed parts of the Kurils in the 18th century, while the Russian Empire pushed from the north. Diplomatic tug-of-war soon followed. In 1855, Japan and Russia signed the Treaty of Shimoda. According to this treaty, Japan controlled the islands of Itorafu, Iturup, Kunashiri, Kunashir, Shikotan, and Habomai, while Russia retained the rest of the Kuril chain to the north. It was a delicate compromise, reflecting the balance of power at that moment. But international agreements are often fragile. In 1875, Japan and Russia signed the Treaty of St. Petersburg. Under this new agreement, Japan received the entire Kuril chain in exchange for ceding control of Sakhalin Island to Russia. For the next several decades, Japan administered the Kurils, investing in fisheries, building settlements, and incorporating the islands into its empire. But the early 20th century would shatter the balance once again, following Japan's victory. In the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, tensions between the two empires simmered, but the Kuril Islands remained firmly under Japanese control. This status quo persisted for decades, until World War II upended the entire global order. In the closing days of the Second World War, the Allies met at the Yalta Conference in February 1945. One of the secret agreements reached there involved the Soviet Union's entry into the war against Japan in exchange for territorial concessions. The Soviet Union committed to declaring war on Japan within 3 months of Germany's surrender. In return, Stalin was promised Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. When Nazi Germany finally fell in May 1945, the countdown began. On August 8, 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, launching a massive invasion of Japanese-occupied territories in Manchuria and Korea. In the final weeks of the war, Soviet forces advanced swiftly across northeastern Asia. On August 18th, the Soviet Pacific Fleet and Army invaded the Kuril Islands. Japanese forces were overwhelmed. By September 1945, Soviet troops had occupied all of the Kurils, including the 4 islands that Japan still considers part of its northern territories. For the Soviets, it was a strategic masterstroke. The Kuril chain provided a critical military buffer, controlling access between the Sea of Okhotsk and the Pacific Ocean. The Cold War was taking shape, and these islands became chess pieces on the geopolitical board. But for Japan, the occupation of these islands marked a bitter and lingering wound. Unlike the larger Kuril chain, which Japan ceded in various agreements, Japan insists that Iturup, Kunashir, Shikotan, and Habomai were never part of what it considers the Kuril Islands, but rather integral parts of its national territory. Japan calls them its northern territories, illegally occupied by the Soviet Union in violation of the earlier treaties. For over 75 years, this disagreement has blocked Japan and Russia from signing a formal peace treaty to officially end their wartime hostilities. Through the Cold War, the issue festered in diplomatic deadlock. The Soviet Union refused to acknowledge any dispute. Meanwhile, Japan maintained its claim, supported by the United States and other allies who saw the occupation as part of Soviet expansionism. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many hoped the dispute might finally be resolved. Russia, under Boris Yeltsin, showed some early signs of flexibility. There were even discussions of returning Shikotan and the Habomai Islets to Japan under certain conditions. But nationalist opposition within Russia quickly shut down any major concessions. For many Russians, particularly those living in the Russian Far East, the islands are seen as hard-won spoils of war, non-negotiable. As Vladimir Putin rose to power, Russia hardened its stance. Massive investments were made in military infrastructure on the islands. New airfields, military bases, radar stations, and modern weapon systems were deployed. In recent years, Russia has carried out military drills on and around the islands, sending a clear message: these islands remain Russian. For Japan, however, the northern territories are not just a matter of territory. They represent history, pride, and national identity. The Japanese government has made the return of the islands a key foreign policy priority for decades. Annual Northern Territories Day rallies remind the Japanese public that this issue is far from settled. Economically, the islands matter too. Rich fishing grounds surround them. The Kuril Islands sit near abundant marine resources as well as potential offshore oil and gas reserves. Control of these waters carries enormous financial significance for both nations. The human element adds further complexity. Thousands of Japanese families were forcibly expelled from the islands after the Soviet occupation. Generations later, many of their descendants still hope to return to the land their ancestors once called home. Negotiations between Russia and Japan have continued on and off for decades. Leaders have met numerous times, from Yeltsin and Hashimoto to Putin and Abe. Each time, discussions raise hopes, but ultimately collapse over one central question: who gets to keep sovereignty over the islands? In recent years, global events have only made matters worse. As tensions between Russia and the West escalated after the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, Russia significantly increased its military presence in the Kuril Islands. It has built new airfields, stationed advanced missile systems, and conducted regular military drills, signaling its firm control. Japan's sanctions against Russia, imposed alongside Western nations, have further strained relations and cooled any chances of compromise. In 2022, Russia officially withdrew from the long-standing peace treaty negotiations, citing Japan's alignment with Western sanctions as the reason. Today, the Kuril Islands dispute remains one of the longest unresolved conflicts from World War II, symbolizing the lingering scars of history and the complexities of modern geopolitics. For Russia, the islands serve as a strategic military buffer between the Pacific Ocean and the Sea of Okhotsk, protecting vital naval routes and national security interests. For Japan, they are a painful reminder of unfinished justice. Territories it believes were wrongly taken and must be returned to restore national pride and historical integrity. Will the dispute ever be resolved? It remains one of the most complicated territorial conflicts on Earth. With both nations digging deeper into their positions and with rising global instability, a final settlement seems more distant than ever. And so, the Kuril Islands, these misty volcanic rocks in the North Pacific, continue to cast a long shadow over Russia-Japan relations. As long as they remain in dispute, the Second World War, for these two nations at least, is not yet fully over. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.